Welcome back, darlings, to the podcast Life Looks Different Now. I'm your host, Slandy Noel. In this podcast, we focus on reading one chapter from the Bible every week, doing our best to decipher the Word of God, learning its rules, its laws, its principles, and apply them to our daily lives. Last week, we read from Genesis chapter 41, and from reading Genesis chapter 41, we learned that Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh. And from interpreting Pharaoh's two dreams, Joseph was able to rise up to power. Joseph became the second man in command in this foreign land that he was a prisoner in. It is marvelous. If you haven't had a chance to read Genesis chapter 41, please go back to the last video, read it along with us, and learn how Joseph rose up to power. Now, this week, we are reading from Genesis chapter 42. Let's see what we can learn from reading Genesis chapter 42. Stay tuned. Now, before I go ahead to reading Genesis chapter 42, I have a favor to ask. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. As you and I are learning the Word of God, others want to do the same. Please give them the opportunity to learn by sharing the channel with them and by liking the channel, helping it to grow. Thank you in advance for your support. Now let's get on to reading the chapter. Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, you have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus, the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the darkness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the darkness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother. while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother. In truth, that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, and to replace every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded the donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this, their heart failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I shall know that you are an honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine to your households, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. And I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you will take Benjamin? All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you will bring him down. You will bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. Ooh, listen, there is so much to unpack in this chapter. Genesis chapter 42 did not fail us, just like the previous chapters. We learned so much. Okay, there are so many lessons in this chapter. First, we notice that the chapter begins with Jacob telling the oldest 10 sons of him hearing about Egypt having grain to sell, because remember, there's a famine everywhere. Remember in Genesis chapter 41, Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh, where Pharaoh saw that, there were 7 plump cows. They were beautiful. They were in great health, and they came out of the water. They rose up from the water, and then 7 skinny, very famished looking cows came up after them and swallowed them whole. And then we learned that Joseph interpreted that to mean that there were, in 7 years of fruitfulness in the land of Egypt, and then that will then be followed by 7 years of famine. And here we see that it wasn't only Egypt that was going through a famine. All the lands were going through that famine. And we learned that Jacob heard that Egypt had grain for sale. So then Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you all sitting there doing nothing? Why are you guys not taking it upon yourselves to go down to Egypt and buy grain so we don't die here? So the whole family doesn't die here. You guys are young. You guys are able-bodied young men. Get up there and go take care of business so this family can last." And we learned that as Jacob is telling his 10 oldest sons to go down to Egypt to buy grain so they don't die, he is not allowing his youngest son, Benjamin, to accompany them. Because we have to remember, Benjamin is Joseph's youngest brother. So Jacob and his beloved wife Rachel had only 2 sons, and we learned that, of course, from previous chapters, that Rachel died while giving birth to Benjamin. And shortly thereafter, we learned that Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers, the 10 oldest brothers. And now the only person that Jacob feels like he has left, the only child he feels like he has left, is Benjamin, right? So he's sending everyone else out to go buy this grain so the whole family, the whole tribe can, sustain itself. But he is not allowing Benjamin to go with them. And it's pretty clear that Jacob doesn't really trust his sons, because if he did trust them, he wouldn't have any doubt. He would have allowed his youngest son to go down to Egypt with them, but he didn't. And just as predicted, of course, there's famine everywhere, just like Jacob predicted, there's famine everywhere. But because Joseph had been preparing under Pharaoh's order, Joseph now is become the governor of Egypt, the second man in command in command in Egypt. He oversaw the whole, project where they taxed the people 10% of whatever they were, cultivating, whatever they were growing in the land. Everything was put in storehouses. And Joseph was the one who oversaw this massive preparation, this massive project under Pharaoh's authority. So now we hear that, Joseph is leading this whole thing. Everyone from all the lands are going to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the land of Egypt has had such a huge surplus that they were able to sell to everyone else who were coming into the land to buy this grain so they don't die. And then we learned that the 10 oldest brothers arrived in Egypt to purchase grain, and the brothers unknowingly had a reconciliation with their brother Joseph. They did it, that experience. They had a reunion, not reconciliation. They had a reunion with their brother Joseph unknowingly. Now, once they got there, they came up to buy the grain in front of Joseph. They bowed down in front of Joseph. Now, remember, one of the reasons why Joseph was sold into slavery. Joseph was so hated by his brothers. His brothers just couldn't stand him. Was because Joseph kept on having these dreams that his brothers, his whole family will be bowing down to him, that he'll be the one leading that family. And we learned that they were so jealous, so envious, so angry that they sold him into slavery. And here, this dream is coming to pass. It's coming to realization where these brothers are bowing down, hoping to purchase grain from the governor of Egypt, not knowing that the governor of Egypt, the person they are bowing down to, is Joseph. See, sometimes when people think they're gonna do you harm, what they mean for to kill you, to hurt you, but God used it to benefit you. That's what's happening here. You see, where they thought that by getting rid of Joseph, by selling him into slavery, that Joseph will never be in charge of them. There goes that dreamer. He's gone now. Let's see how he's gonna be the head of this family. And God has used that to elevate Joseph. God has used that to bring Joseph's brothers to their knees to bow down to him. This is what God is capable of doing. This is what God can do for you and I. When people try to manipulate us, when people try to backstab us, when people try to harm us, God can use that to elevate us and allow our enemies to sit down and watch us rise up to power, watched us live our best lives, you see? And it's amazing how Joseph recognized them right away, but they did not recognize Joseph, because we have to remember Joseph was 17 years old when they sold him into slavery. And now Joseph is almost 40 years old when he is reuniting with his brothers, and he's unrecognizable, because you remember the tradition of the time for the Egyptians, they wear makeup, they have Joseph had his royalty clothing, so they couldn't really recognize him. And Joseph was not speaking to them in their language. Joseph is using an interpreter, right? And then Joseph is accusing them of being spies, because Joseph wanted to test them to see what they were all about. He started questioning his brothers, asking them where they're from. And then they said, we're from Canaan. We just honest men, we good men. And he accused them of being spies. And the brothers couldn't understand why that was happening, because they're like, wait a minute, why is this governor, why is this man in charge being so harsh towards us? We haven't done anything wrong. We only come here, to buy grain. What's going on? And then they're like, we honest men. There's 12 of us. There's 12 of us. The youngest one is back home in Canaan with our father, and one is no more. Talking about Joseph, right? They're saying, Joseph is no more. One of the brothers is no more. But the youngest one is back home with their father, and there's the 10 of them. They're like, we have the same father, and we are good men. We are honest men. We are not here to be spies. We're not here to cause any problem. And Joseph again accused them of being spies, and giving them, offering them one chance to earn his trust. And he said, you know what? I'm just going to allow only one of you guys to return to Canaan and bring back the last brother. So I'll know what you said is really the truth. And he said, if you refuse, by the laugh of Pharaoh, we'll know that you are indeed spies. And the brothers understood what that meant. It meant that their lives were in trouble. Their lives were gonna be in jeopardy, because in jeopardy because Joseph is the second most powerful man in the land of Egypt. He could have them in prison. He could have them killed for being spies. So of course they agree, right? They're like, okay, no problem, fine. But then Joseph did something else. Joseph then decided to imprison all 10 of them. maybe that was, or that was a way to give him the opportunity to stop and think of, what the best plan would be. We don't know. But we know that Joseph, was just like, okay, wait a minute. I'm just going to take all of you guys and I'm going to imprison all of you guys. And he imprisoned them for 3 days, giving him the opportunity to think clearly, to think of what he needed to do. Right. And at that point, he decided to come up with a new plan. And he went back to the brothers and said, instead of taking all of you guys and send only one of you guys home, how about I take one of you, keep one of you guys here in prison and send the rest back home? Because Joseph understood that the brothers coming here to get the grain meant that his whole family back home in Canaan would die if they didn't go back, right? So he thought about it and said, that whole family is going to die. So it only makes sense that he's like, okay, let me send 9 of them back, because then they can bring provision for the family. But then I'm going to keep one of you. And right in front of them, Joseph put, Simon into a bound, tie him up, and decided that Simon would be the one who stayed behind in prison. And he sent the other ones back, and he gave his servants, his people, order to fill up the brothers' sack with grain, and then to return their money, to put their money back in the sack. And I don't know why Joseph did that. I don't know if it was out of, sympathy for them because they were his family and he felt like, okay, or maybe it was because he wanted them to be terrified when they see the money. Maybe that was part of his plan all along, where the brothers can see the money and become very trembling and understand that now they really have to go back, right? They have to return to Egypt and fix this situation. I don't know. The word doesn't say. I will assume that that was part of his plan, to really get them to see their punishment, to get them to be frightened, to get them to come right back to Egypt. In any case, they know that they have to return with their youngest brother, Benjamin, if they are to buy grain in Egypt again. And we know that Egypt is the only place in the land that has enough provision. So there we hear that, although the brothers were terrified, they had no choice but to agree to, this plan that Joseph had proposed to them. So there goes Simon. He's left in prison. And we don't know how long, of a journey it is from Egypt to Canaan. Maybe it's a month-long journey. Maybe it's 2 months long journey. We don't know, right? We just know that these brothers understand, like, they're going to have to make that journey back home without their brother Simon. And what's interesting is Joseph never spoke to them in their language, even though Joseph speaks the language, I suppose Joseph really wanted to see what they were all about, if they have changed in any way, if they were still the same jealous, envious, brothers who sold him into slavery. So he used an interpreter, and apparently the interpreter must have left the room, because the brothers became comfortable enough where they started talking among themselves. They started, saying, well, assuming that Joseph couldn't understand them, they started saying they opened themselves up, and they were remorseful of what they had done years, decades prior to their brother Joseph. You hear they're saying, that now they're being punished. They're expressing, suffering with genuine remorse of what they have done to their brother. They're like, now his blood is in our hands. This is happening because of what we had done a couple of decades earlier. And then there we learned that Reuben, the oldest brother, said, yeah, I did tell you guys not to bring any harm to this young man, but nobody listened to me. You guys went ahead and sold him into slavery. And now we are paying the consequence of this, of you guys' action. Now they all being punished. And then we learned that Joseph he heard what they were saying, and he ran away and he wept. He wept, but he stuck. He actually stuck to the plan. He did not change his mind. He was not like, had that been me, I probably would have changed my mind and be all emotional and be like, oh guys, it's me. But it's pretty clear that, Joseph is a thoughtful man. He decides, I'm going to follow through with this plan. Instead of dealing with only his emotions, he decided to be logical, and frankly, men tend to be more logical than us women anyway. I mean, I'm not saying that women cannot be logical, but I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things, and the way that we are by nature, men tend to be more logical. That could be how Joseph was able to stick with his plan. And once he chose Simon, he had them bind Simon and put him away. And then Joseph ordered the brothers to leave. And at that point, as they're traveling back, one of the brothers opened his sack to feed his animal, and then he noticed that his money was put back in there. And then they really trembled, because they became terrified, knowing now they're thinking, oh my goodness, now they're really gonna believe we spies. Now they're really gonna believe that we thieves. And he became they all became terrified. But we learned that they continued on their journey and went back home to their father. And as expected, when they told Jacob of the news of what had happened, Jacob, listen, he lashed out on them. He became very angry, because he's like, wait a minute, now you guys are killing all of my children. Joseph is gone, now Simon is gone, and now you want me to trust you with Benjamin? You guys are trying to kill me? And he even said it. He said, if you were to lose Benjamin, he will die. And he exclaimed that Benjamin was the only one he has left. Now imagine how the other 9 brothers felt upon hearing their own father speaking as if they don't matter, as if they're not as important. Their own father saying that if Benjamin is gone, he's just going to die. Again, we can see that Jacob is showing favoritism. So it's pretty clear that the children Jacob truly loved were the children he had with his beloved wife, Rachel, who had passed away, of course. Clearly, the children he had with Leah, the children he had with the servants, did not matter to him. And I cannot even imagine how these brothers felt, to know that your father doesn't love you, right? As much as he loves the other ones. Like, your father can blatantly play favoritism right there in your face when you know it. That's very crushing. That's very sad. It's a sad reality, and many of us experience it, I'm sure. But it's fascinating what we are learning here. We're learning that Jacob hasn't changed in that regard. The way he feels about it is those children are very important, and he will die if something were to ever happen to his beloved Benjamin, because that's the only one he has left. So we learn a few things from this chapter. We learn that God is the only one who can elevate us to the highest places. When men said no, when men try to stand in our way, when men try to, manipulate, only God can elevate us and put us in the most powerful places. And we also learned that, it is also possible for people, after having done something horrific, to be remorseful, to repent, because we can see the brothers there are repenting. That's why they're like, God, we are being punished for this, because we have this young man's blood in our hands, our own brother's blood in our hands. And they recognize that. It goes to show that any of us, it doesn't matter what we've done, we can always redeem ourselves by really acknowledging what we have done wrong, by bringing it to the cross and ask for forgiveness. And we learned that it doesn't matter how emotional we get about certain things. Sometimes you have to stick to the plan, like Joseph did. Stick to the plan, to be logical and not only go on our emotions, because sometimes there's a lot at play. You want to test people's character, because when people may have done certain things to you, like can they be redeemed, right? And sometimes some people deserve to be brought back into our circle, but taking the time and be logical and testing their character is very, very, very important. Very important. So I hope you learned something new from this chapter this week, just like I have. And, I hope that you take the time to go over the chapter this week and to pray about it, because there's a lot that we can take from this chapter as well. And I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for reading with me week after week, and for, taking the time to do this. It's so important. We are all growing. We are all learning. And there's nothing better than learning about the Word of God. And you have been with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. I'm praying for you. I hope you have a wonderful, productive upcoming week. And until next time, darlings, bisous.